Throughout history, countless rulers have risen. Kings were crowned, empires were built, and eventually, they faded into the dust of time. But some names are different. Some names refuse to be forgotten. Some change more than a single nation. They change an entire continent. Others change the world itself. The man we are about to discuss was one of them. His armies marched from the borders of China to the edges of Europe. Millions heard his name with fear. Kingdoms fell, cities burned, and the largest contiguous land empire in human history was born. Yet his story did not begin in a palace, not upon a golden throne, nor within a powerful royal dynasty. It began on the vast Mongolian steppe, a land of endless horizons, where the winds never seemed to stop, where winters could be deadly, and where survival itself was a daily struggle. Around the year 1162, a boy was born. His name was Temujin. No one could have imagined that one day the world would know him by a different name, Genghis Khan. At the time, he was only a child, but fate had prepared a very different future for him. Temujin's childhood did not last long. While he was still young, his world was shattered. His father, Yasuge, was a respected leader among the Mongol tribes. One day, he was poisoned by enemies. Not long afterward, he died. His death was more than a family tragedy. It marked the collapse of everything Temujin had known. After his father's death, their tribe abandoned the family. The people who had once followed them simply walked away. Overnight, they were left alone. Temujin, his mother, and his siblings were forced to survive on the unforgiving steppe. They gathered wild berries, caught fish, dug up roots, and often went hungry. Some days, finding food at all was a challenge. Those difficult years changed him. He was no longer an ordinary child. He was learning how to survive, but hardship was only beginning. Tensions soon grew between Temujin and his half-brother Bektar. The conflict escalated, and eventually Temujin and his brother Khosar killed him. Many historians see this as one of the earliest signs of the ruthless leader he would later become. On the steppe, weakness could be fatal, and Temujin learned that lesson better than most. Yet, an even greater disaster awaited him one day. He was captured by a rival tribe. Taken prisoner, a heavy wooden collar was locked around his neck. He was constantly watched. Escape seemed impossible. For many, it would have been the end. But Temujin refused to surrender. Under the cover of darkness, he escaped. He hid, waited, and eventually regained his freedom. That escape did more than save his life. It marked the beginning of his rise, because Temujin had learned something important. Strength alone was not enough. To survive in the world he lived in, he would need loyalty. After regaining his freedom, the young Temujin focused on more than mere survival. He wanted a future, and at the center of that future was a woman named Borte. Betrothed to him at a young age, she would become one of the most important people in his life. But happiness rarely lasted long on the steppe. One night, the Merkit tribe attacked. The camps were raided. Families fled into the darkness, and Borte was taken. For Temujin, this was more than the loss of the woman he loved. It was a devastating blow to his honor. He had to bring her back, but he was not strong enough to do it alone. So he sought help. He turned to Togrul Khan, a powerful ruler who had once been an ally of his father. Another ally soon joined him, his childhood friend, Jamukha. Once again, the two young warriors stood side by side. Together, they marched against the Merkits. The attack succeeded. Borte was rescued, and, for the first time, Temujin tasted victory. People began gathering around him. His reputation spread across the steppe. But success brought new problems. The friendship between Temujin and Jamukha slowly began to crack. The two men saw the world differently. Jamukha believed in the old traditions. He believed leadership belonged to noble bloodlines. Temujin disagreed. To him, loyalty mattered more than birth. Ability mattered more than status. Achievement mattered more than ancestry. These ideas attracted many ordinary warriors. But they also threatened the traditional elite. Over time, friendship turned into rivalry, and rivalry became hostility. The steppe divided into two camps. On one side stood Jamukha, on the other stood Temujin. Years of conflict followed. Battles were fought. Alliances shifted. Old loyalties were tested. Yet, with every victory, Temujin grew stronger. More warriors joined his banner. More tribes accepted his leadership. For the first time, the unification of the Mongol tribes seemed possible. He was no longer a boy struggling to survive. He was becoming a leader, capable of changing the destiny of the steppe. The tribal world around him remained chaotic. Alliances were formed. Betrayals were common. Power constantly shifted from one clan to another. But Temujin understood something many leaders did not. Fear could win obedience. Loyalty could build an empire. Gradually, he surrounded himself with devoted followers, men who trusted him, men who believed in his vision. Unlike many rulers of his time, Temujin did not reserve power for nobles alone. He promoted people based on merit. The best warriors advanced. The most capable leaders rose, regardless of their birth. This approach earned him support from those who had long been ignored by the traditional system, and it made him stronger with every passing year. Finally, in 1206, a great assembly was called. Leaders from across the Mongol tribes gathered together. A decision was made. Temujin was given a new title, Genghis Khan. The exact meaning remains debated to this day, but it is often translated as universal ruler. From that moment forward, he was no longer merely the leader of a tribe. He was the ruler of a united Mongol nation, and the story that would change the world was about to begin. Genghis Khan now looked beyond the steppe. His ambitions had grown larger than the Mongol world. One of his first great targets was China, but the enemy he faced there was unlike anything he had encountered before. China was one of the most advanced civilizations on Earth. It possessed enormous cities, massive populations, ancient traditions, and powerful armies. Its cities were protected by towering walls and heavily fortified strongholds. The Mongols were masters of open warfare. They relied on speed, mobility, and surprise. But high stone walls neutralized many of those advantages. For perhaps the first time, Genghis Khan faced a challenge that could not be solved by cavalry alone. Many leaders would have continued fighting the way they always had. Genghis Khan adapted. He recruited engineers, gathered siege specialists, and learned from the people his armies encountered. New technologies were adopted. New tactics were developed. Before long, the Mongols had become masters not only of the open battlefield, but also of siege warfare. In 1211, the Great Campaign began. Mongol armies crossed into the territory of the Jin dynasty. Towns fell. Fortresses surrendered. Fear spread rapidly. Yet China did not collapse. The struggle would last for years. The deeper the Mongols advanced, the greater the resistance became. But with every campaign, Genghis Khan learned more. His armies grew stronger, more disciplined, more experienced. Eventually, they reached one of the most important cities in northern China, Jiangdu, the city that stood where modern Beijing exists today. It was wealthy, powerful, and heavily defended. The siege dragged on for months. Supplies dwindled, hope faded, and eventually, the city fell. The capture of Jiangdu was more than a military victory. It was a message to the world. The horsemen of the steppe were no longer merely raiders. They had become conquerors, capable of defeating great empires. Yet China taught Genghis Khan something even more valuable than victory. An empire could not be built through conquest alone. It also had to be governed. Administrators were appointed, trade routes were protected, tax systems were organized. The foundations of a vast imperial structure slowly began to emerge. The lessons learned in China would shape everything that followed. But an even greater conflict was approaching. Far to the west stood the Khwarazmian Empire, one of the most powerful states in the Islamic world. At first, relations were peaceful. Genghis Khan wanted trade, not war. He hoped to open new routes between east and west. Merchants were sent, diplomats followed. For a time, everything seemed stable. Then, one decision changed history. In the frontier city of Otrar, a governor accused Mongol merchants of espionage. Hundreds were arrested. Their goods were seized. Many were executed. When news reached Genghis Khan, he was furious. Yet he did not immediately declare war. Instead, he chose diplomacy. He sent envoys to Shah Muhammad of Khwarazm. He demanded justice, punishment for those responsible. It was the final opportunity to avoid disaster. The opportunity was rejected. Some of the envoys were executed. Others were humiliated and sent back in the medieval world. Harming an ambassador was more than an insult. It was a violation of one of the most sacred customs of diplomacy. At that moment, Genghis Khan made his decision. The Khwarazmian Empire would pay the price in 1219. The invasion began. But this was no ordinary war. It was one of the most devastating military campaigns in history. The Mongol army advanced in multiple directions at once. Columns of horsemen crossed deserts, traversed rivers, and appeared where their enemies least expected them. The Khwarazmian leadership struggled to understand what was happening. By the time they reacted, it was already too late. The city of Otrar fell, then Bukhara, then Samarkand. One by one, some of the richest and most influential cities in Central Asia were brought under Mongol control. Entire regions that had once seemed secure suddenly found themselves exposed. The speed of the Mongol advance shocked the world. But it was not merely speed that made them dangerous. It was planning. discipline, coordination, and the ability to strike with overwhelming force. Following the capture of Bukhara, a famous story emerged. According to some historical accounts, Genghis Khan addressed the city's population. He is said to have declared, "If you had not committed great sins, God would not have sent a punishment like me upon you." Whether those exact words were spoken remains uncertain. But the story survived because it reflected how many people viewed the Mongol conquest. To some, it seemed less like an invasion and more like an unstoppable force of nature. Meanwhile, Shah Muhammad was in retreat. He moved from city to city, attempting to rebuild his armies, trying to organize resistance, trying to stop the disaster unfolding around him. But every effort failed. The Mongols continued advancing. His empire was collapsing. Eventually, he abandoned what remained of his kingdom and fled. The ruler of a vast empire became a fugitive. A man who had once commanded millions now spent his final days in isolation. Far from the power he had once possessed, far from the cities he had failed to defend, he died on a remote island in the Caspian Sea. His empire died with him. The destruction of the Khwarazmian Empire transformed the balance of power across Asia. Central Asia now lay open before the Mongols. Trade routes, kingdoms, and entire civilizations suddenly found themselves within reach of Genghis Khan's armies. His name spread farther than ever before. Across deserts, across mountains, across continents. In Europe, stories of the Mongols began to circulate. In the Middle East, rulers watched the eastern horizon with growing concern. Across Asia, governments prepared for the possibility that they might be next. By this point, Genghis Khan was no longer simply a ruler. He had become a legend. Yet he was more than a conqueror. He was also an organizer, a builder of systems, a man who understood that empires required more than victories. Communication networks were expanded, trade routes were secured, capable administrators were promoted regardless of their origins. Merchants moved more freely across vast distances. Ideas traveled farther than before. Different cultures found themselves connected by a single imperial framework. For many, life under Mongol rule brought stability. For others, it brought devastation. The consequences of the Mongol expansion remain debated to this day. Cities were destroyed. Populations were displaced. Entire societies were transformed. But one fact is impossible to deny. The map of the world would never look the same again. By 1227, Genghis Khan was growing older, yet his campaigns had not ended. Even in his final years, he continued leading military operations. Then, he fell ill. Days passed. His condition worsened, and shortly afterward, he died. He was around 65 years old. The exact cause of his death remains unknown. Disease, injury, a riding accident. Historians continue to debate the possibilities. But an even greater mystery followed: his tomb. No one knows where Genghis Khan was buried. For centuries, people have searched for it. Many claim to have found clues. None have proven successful. The final resting place of the man who built the largest contiguous land empire in history remains unknown. Perhaps that mystery is part of the reason his legend never truly faded. Even in death, He remained elusive, yet his empire survived him. His successors expanded the Mongol realm even further. Their armies pushed deep into Europe. China would eventually be fully conquered, and the influence of the Mongol Empire would continue shaping world history for generations. More than 800 years later, the name of Genghis Khan is still known across the globe. Some remember him as a ruthless conqueror. Others see him as one of the greatest military leaders who ever lived. Few historical figures inspire such different opinions, but almost everyone agrees on one thing. The boy who was abandoned on the Mongolian steppe changed the course of history forever. His name was Genghis Khan. And the stories you've just heard may represent only a fraction of everything ever written about him.